So the premiers and Mark Carney met yesterday to talk about all the goings-on in Canada and out of Canada. And Carney laid out some criteria to fast-track infrastructure projects. And this is something that's important to all the premiers, especially in light of the tariffs and that 51st state threat. And so really this is the gist of it. A 2-year approval range, because this is going to help boost Canada's economy and hopefully allow us to say deuces to the US and their pressure tactics. And Carney was asked what's going to get first dibs. And he said it's not about first dibs, I'm paraphrasing, but it's a way to look at all of the concerns of all of the provinces when they're putting forward their proposals. Because there's an understanding that we got to get this stuff going. But it's the old adage, measure twice, cut once. And this is why some of them might take 2 years. And it's a living process. So if a province puts something forward right now, but it becomes obsolete or unnecessary, things can be amended. Overall, it's not a bad idea.
And thank you to each of my colleagues, premiers from across Canada, who, as I say, collectively, we represent all Canadians as well, like the Prime Minister and the federal government does. We had a good meeting with discussions around how we can advance the opportunities for Canadians from coast to coast to coast, how we can work together to meet the aspirations and the statements of the Prime Minister with respect to becoming the strongest economy in the G7 nations and advancing Canada's opportunity to become a global energy superpower.
That was Momo. Momo was speaking because the meeting was held in Saskatchewan. Last time they met, it was in Ottawa. We're spreading the love around.
I outlined during the meetings the central contribution of the federal government to this mission. First and foremost, to eliminate all remaining federal barriers to internal trade and labor mobility, and to enable the federal government, working with the provinces, the territories, Indigenous peoples, to identify and expedite nation-building projects. To be deemed in the national interest, those projects should, amongst others, strengthen the Canadian economy, strengthen our autonomy, our resilience, and our security, provide undeniable benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, be a high priority for Indigenous leaders, and to drive Canada's clean growth potential.
Carney speaking about Canada's interest. Now, one would hope that provincial interest would also match Canadian interest, because as Mo said, each premier represents all Canadians. Canadians. Now, obviously, each province has its own agenda. The goal is to hopefully work together, because one province isn't going to be able to do something that's solely going to benefit one province, right? And because some provinces don't like interference from the feds, we can't imagine that the feds would try to impose something on a province that wasn't willing to engage in an idea from another province. Because that would just be silly and hypocritical. I'm talking to you, Danny.
The goal here is to get projects built faster so we can create more high-paying careers and greater prosperity for all Canadians.
All Canadians.
We're in a position where we can build big, build bold, build one Canadian economy, and build now. Thank you very much.
One Canadian economy. I'm focusing on the Canadian part of it because a lot of the premiers talked about the importance of unity. Because we are stronger when we work together. Again, talking to you, Danny. So let's see what some of the premiers had to say.
Prime Minister, I want to thank you. Working collaboratively and cooperating with all the premiers. I'm very, very confident. I want to tell the people of Canada, and in my case, the people of Ontario, there's hope.
We know Dougo likes Carney. And he goes on to talk about working together is going to be the best for Canada. Because that should be the focus.
Decarbonized energy. And is that something that, Premier Smith, that you agree with? Or do you feel that we need to get the bitumen out of the ground now as soon as possible?
Well, let's call it the grand bargain, that we know that there is a group of oil sands companies that have been advocating for some time for what they call the Pathways Project that would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways Project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
She's a bitch human. Except BC doesn't want that. They don't want a pipeline through them. I mean, there's other ways to do it, Northern Corridor. But again, just like Alberta wants a say in what's done in Alberta, other provinces are also going to want to say. So Danny's going to have to try and sell that, like a lot. Like you may have to give some of the money to BC for them to even consider having a pipeline through their border.
L'Assemblée des Premières Nations a émis un communiqué aujourd'hui pour dire que votre projet de loi pour accélérer les grands projets d'intérêt nationaux, que c'est une menace à leurs droits défendus par des traités. Ma question, pourquoi il n'y a pas de leader autochtone ici aujourd'hui et comment vous allez faire pour rallier les leaders des communautés autochtones qui pourraient être touchés par ces projets?
I wanted to show that clip for two reasons. First, the question is being asked, why are there no First Nations leaders there? Because a lot of what might happen is going to impact those groups. Carney goes on to say that he's met, had discussions with, and will continue to have discussions with First Nations leaders. But I brought that clip in because it's funny to me. None of the Conservative premiers speak French. They all had to take the little ears and put it up there. Why don't Conservatives speak French? I mean, aside from Legault, but I don't consider him a Conservative. Just an observation.
Oui, j'ai l'impression que c'est considéré comme un projet d'intérêt national. Donc, c'est important. On a signé une entente historique énorme avec Terre-Neuve pour rehausser la capacité de Churchill Falls, pour construire une nouvelle centrale, Gull Island, donc de transporter de l'électricité. Là, on parle de 7200 mégawatts entre Terre-Neuve puis Québec. C'est un projet d'intérêt national.
Legault, of course, was asked a question about the energy sector, because he didn't want a pipeline coming from the west. But he talked about what his province is doing, with the likes of Newfoundland and Labrador.
A nation of our size, which has great people, abundant natural resources, the element to be able to solve that equation that confronts us is unity. It's being able to work together. And so I think that this meeting here today of the First Ministers representing Canadians from different walks of life is an important step forward for us being able to have that showdown with China, have that showdown with the Trump administration, and make sure that you and your jobs come out on top.
Unity.
Well, let me tell you, I'm going to be very blunt here. This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. And that's the most important thing. Now, the Prime Minister is going to go to work, get the legislation passed, and we'll divvy it up. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So
Ford will always be that weird uncle at the barbecue. But all of the premiers seemed happy. Discussion about what's going to help both their provinces and Canada. I mean, it's a first step, right? I mean, Danny posted this about how she met with Carney. Still as bitch human as ever. She posted this picture. I think that's her power move. I love the look the little helper's giving. And then she posted this of Carney sitting across the table from her. There's one other photo I'd like to show you when they were all meeting. Probably one of those photos where you don't know that the photo's being taken. There's Carney. You can see people smiling. You can't see Wobb's face, but you know he's smiling because he's always smiling. Even Legault's smiling. Smiling. You can't see those people, but he's smiling. Smiles across the board. And then there's Sourpuss Smith. Bitch human.